Hey, it's Elizabeth D'Alto, and this is the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untame the Wild Soul is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, Wild Ones? Welcome to episode number 178 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today's episode is a really fun one. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friends Jackie Knechtel and Justin Faerman, which I will do in a moment. But before we dive in, for those of you who are listening in real time, I want to invite you to a free workshop that I'm hosting online next Tuesday, which is July 25th. It'll be at 4:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Eastern time. It will be recorded, but if you make it live, I get to answer your questions in real time, which is always kind of fun. Basically, I have been watching your comments both on my posts during my Wild Soul Summer School sessions that we've been doing now for about a month and a half, and as well in the Facebook group, for those of you who are in our Facebook group, which if you're not, you can join at untameyourself.com/Facebook, and just noticing where you all might need some help implementing. What are some of the sticking points, and especially around the really hot topics that a lot of you or even have emailed us like, oh my God, I really needed this. So specifically the ones about trust, letting go, connecting with your body, loving yourself, the standard ones that women are revisiting over and over and over again, constantly getting better at, but still needing some help. So we'll be diving into all of that. You can sign up for that at wildsoulmovement.com/July. And again, it's free. It will be recorded. So whether or not you can attend live, register if you want to receive the recording for that. So now for today's episode, it was, like I said, super fun to jam on flow with Jackie and Justin. We geeked out on synchronicity, living in flow, the relationship between work and play. And we talked a lot about travel. Jackie and Justin have traveled all over the place, sharing their teachings on flow. So we got into how it resonates across cultures. We talked about money and receptivity, which of course opened up a conversation around trust. And I really hope you can take a lot of inspiration and insight from this one and apply it to your own life. So definitely find me on the interwebs. Let me know if you do. The show notes for this one can be found at untameyourself.com/episode-178. And here we go. Y'all, I am so pumped to have this conversation about flow today with Jackie Knechtel and Justin Faerman. I'm also excited for this to be our first three-way. You never forget your first. So for those of you watching, you can see Jackie and Justin. For those of you listening, you'll definitely be able to hear the difference between their voices. So it should not be confusing. Welcome to the podcast. How are you both?
So good. So happy to be here with you, just so I can hear your laugh for the whole time.
People have asked me, could you just record the laugh, like a laugh track? That should be like the free opt-in on my website. Enter your name and email to hear me laugh nonstop.
I would give my email for that, for sure.
Amazing. No, I can't help myself. So, okay, Justin, we'll do you first. I can't. We're not going to edit it out. I can't help myself, you guys. You know my emotional maturity goes from like 7 to like wise old sage woman. We're in the 7-year-old range right now. But the first question I ask all our men is, what do you love about being a man?
I haven't been a woman, so it's hard to say, but I feel like it's maybe a little bit simpler. Mm. So I like that the ease and the freedom and the simplicity of being a man.
Cool. I like that answer. How about you, Jackie? What do you love about being a woman?
Well, I have never been a man, so I'm just going to steal that. What do I love about being a woman? So many things, but I think what's coming to mind is just sisterhood and being able to share things emotionally, and that being the norm. I can't imagine what it's like for men who aren't, or don't feel like they have that capacity or aren't able to share their feelings.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of women say that, and what's cool is I think we live in a time where it's becoming more and more okay for men to share their feelings, but I think it's still a little dodgy, and I think it just depends on like who, what, when, where, and all the intimate details, right?
Yeah.
So you guys do work in flow. And I know you created a course together. And for people listening, I met Jackie and Justin separately. I've spent time with them together. They are not a couple, just so you know, for the inquiring, gossipy minds. But they work beautifully together, which I love, because I think also a cool thing in terms of this show and Untaming Yourself and Reclaiming, Redefining Womanhood is that men and women can have beautiful working relationships, friendships, and it's not just about all the other things that people think about. So how did it happen? How did you guys, end up working together? Because I know you're two kind of like magicians in your own right, in your own lives. So give us the origin story, whoever wants to tell it.
Well, we both want to tell it.
No, go for it.
Yeah, it's such a cool story, and it's a perfect illustration of what we teach. So you were actually at the beginning of all of this, because one of Justin's clients had connected us and said we needed to know each other because we were both talking about flow kind of in the same way. And he and I jumped on a call, and it was like, wow, this is really weird. Like, how did you come to this? And so we decided we were going to meet. And the first time we met was at that trip at Joshua Tree.
No way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the first time we met in person, was that trip that I organized, small group of people to hang out in Joshua Tree. And I don't think I spent any time with Justin. I thought he was kind of weird, actually.
The truth comes out 2 years later. Yeah.
So yeah, and we decided that we wanted to drop in with each other. And after Burning Man, what was that, 2015? I just had this mysterious pain in my abdomen. And I went to a bunch of doctors, and no one could tell me what was wrong with me. So I was going to take some time. I'd been traveling for the last couple of years nonstop. So I was going to do a retreat at Esalen and take care of myself. And on the way up to Esalen, I was going to stop by Santa Barbara, have lunch or dinner with Justin, drop in, see where the overlap in our teachings was. When I got to his house in Santa Barbara, I was doubled over in pain and said, I need to go to the emergency room. And I ended up in the hospital, which if you're going to be hospitalized, Santa Barbara is where it's at. They've got a farm to table menu and a lotus pond. It's the most. I
actually remember you being on our couch telling me this story afterwards. And I was like, that hospital sounds like non-earthly.
It was pretty incredible. But Justin and his girlfriend came to visit me every day, and which I thought was remarkable because I didn't really know them. And they made time every day to visit me. And in that time that we spent together, I was like, hey, why don't we write a book together? And so I ended up living on their couch for a while. And then shortly thereafter, we just started speaking together all over the world and created this training. And it just kind of happened effortlessly.
So I love when people say effortlessly. I know you guys deal in flow, but effort had to have been exerted to make it come to fruition. So Justin, how would you describe that overlap? So you're speaking together, things are flowing, like creative sparks are flying. How did you give us like the inner workings? Because I know we have people listening. Some people are entrepreneurs, some people aren't, but a lot of creatives and even just in their own lives, having to collaborate with others who they know well or they don't know well is something that people have to deal with. So how would you describe that experience?
It was pretty natural and effortless. I mean, we actually couldn't get Jackie to leave at first.
Did you try?
I don't remember, actually.
It's a pretty cozy couch.
It's a good couch. I mean, we just started having fun together, really. I mean, we just started, the seed was planted to do the book, to go speak, and to just, do that. That was fun to us. It was in our highest excitement. And so just setting that intention, we would start talking and our paths would cross, and she was coming through LA and she would stop by and, we'd talk a little bit more and things just started to come together. And then I think we were on a hike in spring or something, a really beautiful hike. And she didn't have travel plans for the first time in like a while. And she's like, we're like, hey, why don't you move into a room in the house? Because, we're going to start a business together. It would make sense for you to be here, and it'd be way easier than like trying to commute or get on Skype calls all the time. And so she moved in and, it just kind of blossomed from there. I mean, really, to bring it back to the question you asked about effortlessness, this is like essence of flow on a certain level is how can you live and operate in a way where life is effortless?
Yeah.
And, it's kind of a paradox because on one hand, like everything takes some degree of effort, right? Nothing is truly effortless if you look at it objectively, but our subjective experience of something can be effortless. So, there's flow states. What we teach is flow consciousness is kind of the other end of the spectrum. But in flow states, you have like CEOs and high performing athletes, Olympians really, that are doing things that are really technically hard, but their experience of it is effortless.
Yeah.
And they're able to have this paradoxical experience. So, in a lot of ways, yes, we work, we do things, where it takes time and energy to create a course, but there's for us, the distinction is that there's no separation between our work and our play. Yeah. We've built our whole lives around what we love doing. So it's exciting and enjoyable to do that. And it feels effortless. But even on top of that, things just do show up effortlessly as well. Yeah. You're in the right place at the right time based on a lot of different things that we teach, and the resources that you need kind of just show up. And instead of it just being one of those things where it's like, oh, wow, that was so cool. Oh my God, today was amazing. What if every day was like that? What if that was happening 5, 6, 10, 20 times a day for the rest of your life? And it can be, and that's what we figured out how to engineer. So we live like that, and our relationship operates like that. And so it does become effortless for us.
Super cool. And I like, one of the distinction I'm really hearing is like, it's not that it's exactly effortless, like things are happening, things are getting done, you're taking action, not like you guys are just like sitting on the couch and it's all falling together, but it feels effortless. And that intersection between work and play, and I could totally relate to this because even my most recent like biggest creative endeavor of creating the Oracle deck, it really felt so effortless. Felt like we didn't do anything, but like we did a lot of things. But it just, the way it came together, it was like idea in January, out in the world in June. And it's like a technical thing with a lot of pieces and production elements and like a photographer and editing and all this stuff. But I get it. So tell me about, Jackie, I want to hear about some of your travel experiences because I know, Justin, you used the term highest excitement. And I know, Jackie, travel is just one expression of this in your life, but literally just following the highest excitement. I know some people listening, I have a good amount of women who are still kind of recovering from being control freaks. So let me back it up for a second. Were you ever a person who needed to like control all the details?
Yeah, it's funny that you should say that. So I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm a New Yorker. So my former self was a people-pleasing, perfectionist, overachieving, type A, control freak New Yorker that lived in constant low-grade anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I kind of micromanaged every aspect of my life so well that nothing fell apart. So I didn't realize that I had anxiety. And every time I go back to New York now, I kind of feel that everyone lives in this state of just being so tightly wound, and you kind of need it for survival there. And now that I'm in Santa Barbara, my system has had an opportunity to decompress. It's so different. So I didn't even recognize that I was living in this state of anxiety all the time. So yeah, I was a total control freak before.
And so how did you realize that you were living in the state of anxiety? What was like the impetus?
Well, rewind back to 2009. I was working as a speech pathologist and behavior specialist for children with autism in New York at a private practice that was going really, really well. I had a waiting list of clients and a really profound gift at connecting with these kids. But I was doing it at the expense of my health. I was working 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, got a chronic autoimmune condition, was living on a cocktail of medications, just really at the point of burnout. And then I was taking a really much needed vacation to an island off the coast of Madagascar called Mauritius, which makes sense to go 30 hours across the world when you have a week off. But I ended up on this trip really just for the first time taking care of myself. And I got the call that my brother died. Mm. And so that was really a pivotal moment in my life, just a wake-up call to examine where I was living out of alignment. And it was in that moment that I decided if I were truly living my life for me on my terms, what would that look like? And I decided it would be traveling around the world. And so, I had every reason why I couldn't live this way. I had a mortgage, I had a car, I had a private practice, I had children depending on me, I had a grieving family, I had every reason why I couldn't live my dream. And I decided that I was going to do it anyway. So 4 months later, I gave away most of my stuff, put the rest in storage. I walked away from my practice. My apartment didn't sell, so I just left it. And I did this year-long trip around the world, which led me to a retreat in Australia that they diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder. And I was like, are you kidding? My life is great. I'm traveling. I've been on the road free for 9 months. So I didn't even realize that I had been living this way for most of my life. And that was an opportunity for me to really up-level and let go of a lot of stuff. And then travel was really my training ground for flow. It was living moment to moment and really feeling into what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, who I wanted to spend my time with. And you can't really control life when you're traveling. There's so many variables that you can't possibly plan for.
Yeah.
And so I just stopped planning altogether and just showed up day by day, and then magic would happen. So that was really how it began in 2009.
I have a question. You don't have to answer this because it's pretty personal, but if I'm thinking it, I know some of my listeners are thinking it. How did you handle the money? Like, did you have a bunch of money in the bank? Like, how were you financing this? Was it like travel points? Because I know sometimes people are like, oh, great, you traveled around the world, but like, how the F do you pay for that?
That's a great question. And I'm an open book, so I'm happy to share.
Great.
And thank you for asking. At that point, well, I'd been really successful in my career. So I did have a bunch of money in the bank, but also it's way cheaper to travel than it is to live in New York, right?
That's a good point.
Of what New York City life is like. And, for $2,000, I had a tiny little shoebox studio apartment. And, it's actually cheaper. You have no bills. I did a lot of couch surfing and living, with friends, and was hosted by people. And I didn't really budget. And this is an example of following my highest excitement. It was really entrusting and surrendering to what was going to show up. If I had to cut my trip short, I would rather do that than turning down experiences of a lifetime. Like I went hot air ballooning over the Masai Mara at the migration, and it was maybe $500 for a half hour.
Yeah.
But how often am I going to be there? So I would rather cut the trip short and live full out than to cut corners and scrape by and kind of have this mediocre experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's way cheaper often to travel, particularly if you go to countries like in Asia or South America. Your money goes way further.
Can I play devil's advocate too?
Yep.
Because you can do it that way. You can do it with money in the bank. You can also do it for free or close to it. A good friend of ours, Gregorio, who I think you know Gregorio.
I did one of those breathing workshops on like Zoom with him one time at a common friend. Jackie, were you there? I don't think you were there, but I did. I have not met him, but I did a breathing workshop, and then I was like messed up for 3 days. So
yeah, it's powerful. He travels the world with no money, and he goes just as many places as Jackie did, and he gets flown all over the place and invited to events for free because of how he shows up and who he is, and because he lives so deeply in flow. And so whatever spectrum you're on, it doesn't matter. If it's your highest excitement to be traveling the world and you apply flow, if you live in flow, it will happen. So it's not so much about money, although you can travel like in more luxury when you have money usually, not always, but it's really about how you show up and your intention and how you live more than anything else.
I like this. And it involves a level of receptivity, right? Because if you're going to get invited to places and people are going to offer to fly you or host you or whatever, you have to be willing to like say yes and like allow people to do that stuff for you and not be like, no. Or like, I'll do it myself. Like giving people the benefit of the doubt that if they're making the offer, it's genuine. And if it's not, like they get to deal with that, right?
Yeah, it plays on so many levels because you need to trust. So working through any fear or doubt that you might have when staying with people or just letting someone else make plans. So there's that level of it. But yeah, it's a lesson in surrender.
Yeah. So I have a biased question because I did a lot of traveling this year and I learned, it was kind of like my playground for how do I want to travel moving forward? Like what places do I want to choose to go to and why? And one of the things I concluded is I really want to be in every ocean and sea, like on the earth, and swim with like as many dolphins and whales, like right up next to them as I possibly can. That is going to be how I coordinate my travels from here on out. But like, I couldn't have known that without going to all these different types of places and learning. My body doesn't like the desert. Mountains are cool for like a day or two, but like I need to be near the ocean. And so I love that you mentioned the trust, and I love that you mentioned like really needing to experiment and surrender and be willing to cut a trip short or be willing to like pivot and go, thought I was going to want to do that. I didn't, or this is a little pricey, but come on, once in a lifetime for real. So how do you guys actually define flow in your system?
Yeah. So it's a big thing. It's hard to like encapsulate into one sentence. We do have a sentence, and I'll say it, but the way that I like to describe it, the way that's really felt right to me lately is that it's like a new operating system for your consciousness. New operating system that produces effortlessness and exponential growth and abundance and harmony and inner peace and healing and all these other different things that make our life awesome. And, it's the essence of it is that it's flow is whenever, as we define it, flow consciousness, which is a little bit different than flow states, is when everything that you want and need to be successful, to be wildly successful and grow, giving your gift to the world and living your passion comes to you effortlessly and in perfect synchronicity. And that's the most succinct way that we found to describe it. And it's really like an amalgamation of a lot of different things and then a lot of things that we've never seen anywhere. It's a cross between Zen and Taoist Wu Wei and quantum physics and neuroscience and healing and all these other different disciplines kind of mishmashed into one, and then a whole bunch of things that we've never seen that we said, hey, why isn't anybody talking about this? So it's really a way of life, and it's a way of living and perceiving and seeing the world and showing up. And, it's one of those things that you can do as little or as much as you want, but the more that you put in, the better your life gets.
I appreciate you mentioning how many different practices you both have synthesized to create your system, because it's indicative of the amount of work that you had to do on yourselves and experimentation and trial and error to be able to get to this place. Because I think sometimes with a thing like this, it sounds like a magic bullet and people are so excited to just pop into flow. And it sounds like you've done the legwork so that other people don't necessarily have to, yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We talk about flow being about 60% deep inner work and then maybe 40% the principles that we've created. So there's a lot of inner game there. And I think of flow as your natural state. And it's a process of subtraction and really unraveling those patterns and limiting beliefs and emotional trauma to come back to that place where you are tapped into your intuition and able to live in this carefree, peaceful state.
Yeah.
What percentage of the time are you guys carefree and peaceful 24/7?
No, but maybe 23/6. I don't know. I mean, we definitely have our moments, but like, it's like, people always say like, oh my God, you guys are so calm. And, you're always laughing and playing. And it's really like that most of the time. And the times when it isn't are really the greatest gifts, because those are showing us where we still aren't there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's an opportunity to grow and expand into it, which is,
I actually welcome triggers now because it's an opportunity to unravel another layer and to find more peace. And really, it's not that we're without our challenges in life, right? I had a lot of health things show up over the past year and had 3 procedures. And, it was scary. I was afraid and I wasn't sure what was happening, but the way that I navigated was so different than I would have in the past. So I wasn't going into why me or this shouldn't be happening and resistance. And I was able to go in with a really positive attitude. And especially since the first time ended up, so well, I ended up with a business partner, a best friend, and, traveling the world teaching flow. The second procedure that I went in for, I was expecting magic and miracles. So it was a very different experience.
Yeah. So I'm super curious if you guys have found, where in the world have you been teaching flow so far? I know all over the US, right? And you guys were recently in Italy?
Oh, we've kind of been all over.
Let's see, just working backwards is probably the easiest. I mean, Croatia, Italy, Israel, all over the US, both coasts in the middle, Central America,
Bali,
Morocco,
different states in the US.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I asked. I ask because I'm curious if you noticed, based on where you were culturally, how if that changed either people's level of receptivity and also the, I guess, speed to implement or willingness to implement.
Totally. Okay, great question. And actually, we had a chance to test this very thing.
Cool.
Just a week ago,
because we spoke at Hive, and they had 49 countries represented there.
Out of 120 people.
And not like, all of Western Europe and plus the United States. It was like
Gabon,
Azerbaijan. Yeah.
You're cool. Like naming countries I haven't even heard of. I don't mind admitting that. I'm like, that's a country.
Zimbabwe,
I've heard of Zimbabwe.
Yeah, just like really diverse countries, Cambodia, Vietnam, there's like people from everywhere.
Kazakhstan.
Yeah, Kazakhstan. So we had a great representation in our talk. I think there was about 65 people there. And so we got to hear from people from every country.
That is cool.
How across the board, it landed. It was like they didn't, some of the countries that we thought might not have cultural context for it or might be stuck in really different, cultural paradigms. It was like they just totally dropped in, which was really amazing, and I think that's a reflection of like how much we try and strip out jargon and step it down. Yeah. So that it kind of speaks on this universal human level.
I like that. And so, but let me ask you another question. What kind of event is Hive? What's the purpose of that?
It's an event for CEOs and global leaders. And the purpose is really to gather them, to help them get more clarity on their purpose and their greater mission in the world.
Okay. I ask because, again, and I'm being a little devil's advocate here. I'm not trying to disprove your work, but what I am interested in, because personally in my own life, I've been geeking out on privilege and systems of oppression and all these types of things. That's still a bubble of its own, right? Like there's a level of entry, like someone needs to be a CEO. They've already signed up. Like I interviewed Danielle Laporte for her new book recently, and we talked about how, for the most part, we're preaching to the choir. And like, so in a way, that was a little bit of a choir, but still cool to hear that culturally people were open to it and weren't like, what is this bullshit?
This is a phenomenal conversation to be having, and one that we've been discussing actively as we are traveling all over the world. A friend invited us to share this work with refugees, and so obviously the way that we present the information is going to be a little bit different and more sensitive.
Yes.
But navigating these different scenarios, and when we were in Israel, it was a really profound moment for me when we met this woman who created Shanti House, and she's now CNN Woman of the Year, and she's bringing thousands of at-risk youth into this home, this nurturing environment to change their lives. They were drug addicted and homeless and on the streets, and the work that she was doing is so profound. And 8 years ago, when my brother died of an overdose, I had this feeling like I didn't want his death to be in vain. So I really wanted to do something, but I really didn't know what to do. I wasn't a specialist and I didn't have a message. And so in that moment, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like it's fast forward 8 years. I now have a message that can really impact these communities. So I feel called to share it with them as well, and people that are incarcerated. And we're talking about doing at some point a buy one, give one model for the program. So that way we can have a greater impact on the world and not just for the privileged.
Yeah. I've been geeking out. I don't want to drop that like as a bomb in a conversation. So I'm glad you were receptive to it. It's more out of like my own curiosity. It's not to be like pointing a finger, like, are you guys thinking about this?
Yeah. Totally.
No, we have this conversation a lot.
I just had this conversation last week with another really high level group. And, there were some interesting theories of change that were presented saying that it's actually, important to preach to the choir because that they're the early adopters and they're the ones that get behind it and build the momentum in there. Not that we're just trying to preach to the choir. Right. We're actively thinking about how we can bring in the message to a wider audience. But, it's like the way that our society is structured is like, it just naturally,
got to start somewhere.
Yeah. But also, it will trickle down to the masses and have a greater impact than we could on our own.
Yeah, I like that. I like that too. Because again, I think about ripple effect all the time. And, even for the people listening who don't have a blog or a podcast, maybe don't have a brand, I'm like, how you raise your kids matters. Like how you just talk to other humans at the grocery store matters. Like that's all a ripple effect. Like we've all had these experiences where someone was like so nice to us or like it's just so funny or like quirky or cool, like maybe out at the coffee shop or whatever, and it like changed your whole day. Like that's a ripple effect. So, and I love to hear that reiterated by other people too, because I think we live in a time where like every other day, because of social media, like we get way more access to what's not going well on the planet than we used to. And I think that gets to skew the perception that like the world is going to hell in a handbasket, which it's not. And we can pay a little more attention to the stuff that's going well and feeling good too. So I love that. Can we geek out on synchronicities, that like just some of this out of this world stuff? I know you guys are like, how much time do we have left?
We have had a week of just profound nonstop synchronicity, and synchronicity is one of the hallmarks of flow. And we talk about how you can calibrate how in flow you are by the amount of synchronicity that you experience in your life. And we've just had so many this week. Can we share a few?
Yeah, that's what I want. I just want to geek out on it. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm going to go first. Okay. I want to go first. So we're in Boston at Hive, and like on the third day or the second day of the conference or something, they had a party, and they took us outside of the city, like pretty far outside of the main area of the city, into like a historic reservoir, like water treatment plant.
The waterworks?
Yeah, the waterworks. And it's a good like 15 or 20 minute drive outside the city. And so we take a bus over there, and they have it all done up all beautifully, and there's a DJ and hors d'oeuvres and stuff. And we're at the party, and this guy that I was talking to, who's in our group on our bus, this really amazing guy, who's like on the board of Ben and Jerry's, and he's working to like change conscious capitalism and all this stuff. He's like, hey, there's someone that you got to meet here, Katyana Kite. He's like, I want you to go meet her because I think she'd be super aligned, and she's a good friend of mine, and you should talk to her. So I went over and we started talking. And she had to go take a phone call, but she's like, hey, let's connect on Facebook real quick. And so we got connected on Facebook, and she's like, ooh, I love looking at, mutual friends. So let's see who our mutual friends are. And so we like started just naming the friends. And then the second or third on the list was our friend, Gabby and Raj, who I think you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we started geeking out about how much we love Gabby and Raj. And, they live in Santa Barbara here with us. And, we love seeing them. We go to Burning Man with them and all this stuff. And then she had to go run and take her call. And so she left, and I think I went over and I found Jackie somewhere, and we started talking. And literally 3 minutes later, Gabby and Raj walk in the door. They literally come into the event, and they had no idea we were going to be there. We had no idea that they were going to be there. They just happened to be in Boston for some landmark training, and they knew the facilitator of the group who was leading our group, and she told them that they should come so that they could say hi. And they walked in and they saw us, and they're like, what the hell are you doing here? We're like, what the hell are you doing here? And we just had this amazing moment where 3 minutes earlier, I was talking about them for the first time in maybe a month and a half. And then they walked in, 3,000 miles away across the country.
That's freaking cool.
So fun. Can I tell one too?
Yeah.
We get so excited about this stuff.
Me too. And then I'm going to tell you guys one too, because I haven't told it on the podcast yet, but you go.
Awesome. Yeah, it never loses the awe. So we were in New York a couple days ago, and we did a workshop at Gramercy House. And the next day I was with a friend, and he's like, oh, come on, I want to bring you to a party at Gramercy House. There's a bunch of influencers. So I ended up at this other party at the same place. And we walk in, and we kind of didn't really know anyone. So we're like, how are we going to break the ice? What are we going to do? So I said, why don't we play a game? Why don't we see if we can guess where people are from? So we have to start a conversation with them, and within a few sentences, we have to figure out where they're from. And it was a great icebreaker. It was super fun. And every person we met was super meaningful. So the third person, I asked the host of the party to point to a random person in the room, and he pointed to a woman that was sitting all the way across the room in the window. So I went over to her, was chatting, and I was totally wrong about where she lived. But she was actually from San Diego. And I asked her what's lighting her up these days. And she was sharing about this new product line that she has. It's holistic skincare. And I was like, wow, I have a ton of people that I can plug you in with that are in this space. And I said, we were just on this Reality Israel trip with a bunch of people in wellness. And she's like, oh, were you with Allison Charles? And I was like, yeah, I was. And they're doing some work together. So there was just one after another. And I was telling her that I was at this same space at Gramercy House the night before doing a workshop. And she asked what the workshop was. And I said it was about the art of living in flow. And I told her about flow. And she's like, oh, I could really use your help. I've got this one block that I can't seem to work through. So I gave her my card. And on the back of the card, it says, why hustle when you can flow? And she kind of froze for a second. She's like, I was supposed to lead a workshop tonight that got canceled called Hustle to Flow.
Come on.
Like, whoa, okay. And so then I Googled it, and sure enough, there was an Eventbrite with her name. And in her bio, there were so many similarities. Like, we both did NLP and went to IAN and did B school and all of these other things. Yeah. Even the wording that we used, talking about being a master manifestor and stuff like that, it was so similar that it was really kind of eerie, but it was awesome.
I love that. A woman interviewed me this morning, and she was like, I just need to tell you, if you go to my website, I'm not copying you. We just use a lot of similar words. And I'm like, girl, there's only so many words in the English language. Like, no worries. I get it.
Let's hear yours.
My favorite one recently is I'm kind of over living in San Diego. I have loved Malibu since 2006, since the first time I went, and like fantasized about it. And it kind of felt like it was a little like out of my reach, you know? So back in May, I just rented an Airbnb for the weekend in Malibu. I wanted to go check it out and like feel it out, like see like, does this body want to live in that place? So I go to Malibu. And the first day I'm there, I'm on Instagram, and I see that I just missed my friend, Cassandra Bodzak, who's been on the podcast. Like, she literally posted a picture at this Sun Life Organics place where I had been like 2 seconds before. 2 seconds is an exaggeration. It was like 15 minutes. So I text her, and I'm like, oh my God, I just missed you. She's like, are you going to be here tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, meet me at Little Beach House. So there's like 17 synchronicities packed into this one story. When I was thinking about moving back up to LA a couple weeks before that, I had Googled to see if there was a Soho House in Malibu, because I figure I'm moving to a new place. I know plenty of people in LA, but one of the reasons is I really want to get tapped in with like the creative community and entrepreneurs, you know, like I love being around creative people doing cool stuff. And so Soho House, that's like primarily their jam. And I'm like, oh, and there wasn't a Soho House in Malibu, whatever. So I Google the next day, Little Beach House, to find the address. It's an adorable name. I'm thinking it's like a coffee shop or something. It's the friggin' Soho House in Malibu. But it's not called Soho House. It's called Little Beach House. So that's why it hadn't come up. So I get there, and the other thing is, ever since I've moved to California, I've like in my mind had this fantasy of what my ideal workspace, like communal workspace, would look like. Because I love working in coffee shops and stuff. But like even here, and you guys I know have both been to like Encinitas, Carlsbad, there's nothing like on the water. So I'm envisioning like kind of like a hybrid between the best coffee shop, cozy chairs, swanky hotel lobby, but like on the ocean. Like I've been making this up in my mind for years. I walk into a little beach house. It is exactly like I have been picturing. Then I get out onto the patio. I was going to take some call or whatever. I check my email. I have an email from my friend Val, and her email is like, this is going to be weird. And she tells me that she's only had 2 other dreams like this in her life when they were super vivid. And the thing that she dreamt actually came true. And she's like, so I had a dream last night that you and I were in Malibu, and you told me you were moving here. And I'm like, well, I'm in. I had already decided. And then the one last thing that happened is when I went back over to where Cassandra and her friend Fern were. I am obsessed with dolphins, as I mentioned earlier. And there were dolphins swimming by, which, you know, in San Diego and Southern California, you see dolphins all the time. And I got really excited. They stopped right in front of us and were freaking playing for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. It was like so obvious that I was like, if I don't move to Malibu, life might start kicking my ass, because it made it so clear.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love that. That's amazing. And I love your enthusiasm about it.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
And you're that much closer to us.
I know, yeah.
I know. I was going to say, so come down anytime, because I'm going to have a guest room. So what do you do? So we've talked about synchronicity now, but there's a way, like I know, I like to celebrate it and talk about it because I feel like that invites more of it. So chat a little bit more. You're noticing the synchronicity. What do you do with it?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on what kind of synchronicity it is. I mean, like, so like, you know, you had the dolphins, right? Which is a meaningful animal to you, right? Yeah. And then they stop and they play in front of you, right? Like they stop in front of you, right? And it's almost like, oh, we're here for you, right? I think synchronicities are kind of like dreams where they're symbolic and that there's a hidden meaning in them that's personalized to you. And so, you know, sometimes they're really deep and profound and reflecting back something that's important to you. And I think other times, and this is how we normally talk about it in flow, is that synchronicities are like road markers on the path of life, letting you know that you're dialed into your hero's journey, to flow, to your purpose, right? Yeah. So sometimes they're not always like super meaningful and like profound and, oh my God, this is a breakthrough. A lot of times they're just kind of like life going like.
Winking at you. For anyone listening, Justin's like giving us some winks.
Yeah. You know, just like keep this way. Good job.
Yeah,
you know?
Like crumbs.
Yeah, so that's kind of like how synchronicities tend to show up for me. It's like they're super meaningful and profound, or road markers for both.
Yeah,
so.
I love that. Just like little winks, like you're on the right path.
And we encourage people to kind of track them.
Yeah.
So to keep a journal, and because they're easy to miss, and you might just push it aside as, oh, what a crazy little coincidence, and forget about it. But then you start to see how often they're happening, and then you really get tapped into the interconnectedness of everything, and life just really feels magical.
Yeah. As part of our team meetings with my right-hand woman, we don't always do the formal outline, but when we follow it, the last part is actually like synchronicities, universal truths, like what's been showing up in your life. So we can like be constantly amplifying that energy in our own lives, and then obviously bringing it into the organization as well.
I love that.
Yeah, that's super powerful.
So, and you also mentioned, and I totally agree with you, when the synchronicities start to dry up, it can mean you're just not paying attention for them, or they're just not happening, and you are kind of out of flow. So how do you help people get back into flow when that's going on?
Yeah. So do you have 20 hours? And then we
right.
can,
I know, just like, you know, the bullet points. I know you have a whole course on this, and we'll put links in the show notes and stuff. But
no, totally. I just planned.
I like it.
I mean, a really easy access point, something that we kind of touched on a number of times. I mean, there's, like Jackie was saying, there's the whole inner rewiring aspect, and that obviously is a more in-depth process, but a really easy access point for flow is learning to use your intuition powerfully and let that be the guiding force in your life. That's one access point. And like we've been talking about in the interview, and you mentioned a couple times, is like following excitement and inspiration, right? Intuition shows up in a lot of different ways, a lot of different signals and cues and ways that it shows up, but the feelings of excitement and inspiration are forward-moving signs of intuition. They're forward moving, they're pulling you in a certain direction, which is forward, because intuition can also pull you backwards. So by living in your excitement, in your inspiration, in your joy, in your bliss all the time for every decision from big to small, you can begin to access flow and stay in that rhythm of synchronicity versus operating more from your rational, logical mind. Like, I need to do this, and this is on my to-do list. You know, it doesn't feel good, and it's not exciting to me, but I'm going to do it because I think that that's what I have to do. It's a really linear way of operating, but flow is super nonlinear. And synchronicities are super nonlinear. You never know when they're going to show up. So in order to stay in that rhythm, you have to operate from a more felt sense compass.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We teach that your reality, your life, is a feedback mechanism to kind of show you where you're out of alignment. So if things aren't working, you're not experiencing the synchronicities, and you kind of feel stuck, you can reverse engineer it to find the beliefs or, the emotional patterns that are creating that.
Yeah. Justin, something you just said, you said intuition can pull you forward or it can take you backwards. What's an example of intuition taking you backwards?
Well, it's not so much that it's going to take you backwards. It's that it might tell you not to do something.
Got it.
So like, your intuition is going to say, yeah, okay, great, go do this thing. Or it's going to say, no, don't do this thing. I know you know this, but I'll just say it because I think it's a really good example of your intuition saying don't do something. But there's a woman who we did a workshop with Rich Lippman's 4PC group a year or two ago. And one of the women there was like raising her hand and we were talking about intuition. She's like, I got to tell you the story. And she's like, yeah, one time my intuition, I just felt like this crazy sinking feeling in my stomach. I was about to get on a plane to go somewhere, and I had this really deep sinking feeling, and I just knew that I couldn't get on the plane. It didn't make sense. I paid like $1,000 or something for the ticket, and I just every fiber of my body was saying no, and so I didn't get on the plane. And she's like, and I'm really glad I didn't, because that was one of the planes that flew into the World Trade Center. And yeah. And so, your intuition is always trying to guide you to your highest good, to flow, to whatever's in, whatever's dialed into your purpose and is for the good of humanity. And so, it's super important to listen to at full spectrum.
I love this. It's just like such a strong example. Everything she had, kind of like Jackie, you were talking about earlier, like you had every reason not to take that trip. That woman had every reason to get on that flight.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. If you're thinking with the mind, it's like, well, I paid $1,000 for this. Why would I just sacrifice my ticket? But it's like, you can't see what's about to happen, but your intuition can. And so
your intuition's like, yo, mama, your life worth way more than $1,000. Let's stay here. Amazing. So what else? What do you guys love to share about flow that I haven't asked you?
What do we love to share about flow that you haven't asked us? Gosh, there's so much. You stumped us.
No, I mean, just use your intuition, Justin.
Let me turn it around on you. What do you want to know about flow that we haven't talked about?
Well, that's why I asked you, because I feel like you guys have such a breadth of amazing experiences from all over the place that I don't know you have because I haven't seen you in such a long time. So I guess just go with like what it's even like that. I love these stories, like something like that from a workshop, or maybe what's the most interesting experience you've had at a workshop of, or have you had an experience of someone challenging you and being like, I think this is bullshit.
Okay. I was just going to say that. I was like, I think for me, it's fun when people challenge us.
Cool.
And people do. Not always. Sometimes people are like, oh my God, this is just like confirmation of everything. And other times people are like, wait, how do you know your intuition can read the future? How do you know that it's always going to guide you to somewhere good? And like, I think that, we live like that. So we take it for granted, but
totally.
not everybody's in that paradigm. And so a lot of times they challenge you, and that forces you to really, explain it in more depth and with more artfulness, and to really, bring the science in if there's science there, and, kind of drill it down. I think for me, that's super exciting, is that, we know this stuff works from experience and from taking lots of people through it and applying it in our own lives to great effect. But, it's fascinating to look at the mechanics. Like, how does intuition actually work, right? What is the science behind it? What are the mechanics of these things? And like, how can we talk about that, integrate that into our work and explain it in a way that helps people understand that it's not just woo-woo, but this is actually a real thing. It's a real phenomenon.
Yeah, cool. So let's go down that rabbit hole. Jackie, how does intuition show up for you? Like when you get what I know some people will call it an intuitive hit, what is that like for you?
So I know it's different for me than it is for other people.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I didn't think I was intuitive because as a child, I was super intuitive, but then people, the adults and authority figures would tell me the opposite of what I was sensing and feeling.
Yeah.
So I just kind of shut that down. So I kind of had to open myself back up to it and relearn how to feel. And I also had a lot of emotional wounds and trauma to work through that were clouding my intuition. And I couldn't tell, well, is this fear or is it resistance or is it actually my intuition?
Yeah.
So for a long time, I would get these gut feelings or something, but I would ignore it because I didn't know how to trust my body. But now I would say that one of my superpowers and one of my greatest gifts is this, it's just a deep sense of knowing.
Yeah.
And I can't really explain, I'm not necessarily getting the chills or my hair standing up. It's just a profound knowing that there's no doubt. And again, even when it doesn't make sense, I was offered funding for my dream autism clinic. And on paper, everything should have been a yes. It was everything I thought I wanted. But in my body, it was a no.
Yeah.
It just felt heavy and contracting and just like, it just was not lighting me up.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, shouldn't you be excited about this? But my body was telling me no very, very clearly. And so now this is how I guide all of my decisions. And so I just feel into it, whether, it could be the most amazing experience and it could just be a hell no. And I honor that. And I sometimes don't know why.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can really relate to that. I get a lot of those direct knowings. And people are like, well, why? Or like, explain it. And I'm like, I'd love to be able to explain it to you. I just can't. But let's watch what happens when I make this choice. And like, there will be your answer,
Yeah. And hindsight is 2020. You go back and you're, oh yeah, well now it all makes sense.
Now it all makes sense. I liked it sometimes. You guys know the R. Kelly song Bump and Grind that starts out with like, my mind is telling me no, but my body. I'll sometimes sing to myself and be like, my mind is telling me yes, but my body. Such a weird, I do this shit like by myself in my car. And then I laugh just like that because I'm entertaining myself. It's fine. Justin, how do you experience intuition?
I do get the chills sometimes. Like there's like a range actually.
Yeah. So
there's like a range of experience from face. You can't deny like, whoa, what just happened? And I experience it as a sensation. So like I get intuition in my body, like, when I'm talking to someone, I'm feeling things empathically. I get intuitive thoughts. I get huge insights that land intuitively. I get like whole projects and visions and solutions and all kinds of stuff. And, I think talking about it, especially on a mental level, is like really interesting because that's when it gets really cloudy for people. Like when something's happening in your body, it's kind of easier to discern, but it's like, how do you separate an intuitive thought or intuitive insight from a non-intuitive thought and a non-intuitive insight? And there is something about the intuitive insight, the intuitive thought that feels different.
Yeah.
Not emotionally different, but felt sense different. Like it feels expansive. Like I have that thought and like my whole being just like feels like it's being nourished and uplifted.
Yes.
And if I have the thought and it's just flat or maybe it feels kind of gross inside or like heavy, like that's how I know that it's not on that wavelength. And so I'm really just kind of aware. I've learned, to tune into the felt sense that I'm receiving, like when something's happening. And so when I get a thought that's like a huge intuitive hit or download or whatever, like I know because it has that feeling. And also like when I'm working one-on-one with clients or when I'm coaching or even teaching live, like a lot of times, like I'll just have this insight come through and like my whole body, it'll feel like I stuck my finger in a light socket and I'll just get, the chills and energy will just move all over my whole body. And that's for me, like a really extreme sign that whatever is happening, I'm thinking is really true. And I've hit on something that needs to be like said or expressed for the benefit of this person.
Yeah. And often, again, you don't know what it's for. I often get them I'm a super connector. So I'm always kind of putting people together. And sometimes I don't know why, but it's just that you need to know each other. And I'm completely lit up and super excited about it. And sometimes I can't even explain to them why.
Totally.
And then they end up, married or starting a business together. And
I just did that recently. I met this woman at the end of April, and I had a former client, and I was like, I don't know why. It's not logical at all, but I need to connect you guys. And they connected, and my client texted me. She was like in tears. She was like, oh my God, this was a life-altering, trajectory-altering conversation. I'm like, I knew it. I had no idea why, but God, I love it. And so I'm so glad we got to geek out. Like, this was kind of my intention to go in to like demonstrate for people how different the experience is. Like, flow is a concept. You guys have created a framework around it, but there's so much uniqueness and intricacy and nuance to the experience. And to be able to like have a conversation between people who I know we all have different experiences of it, but we all pursue this, and like we're so open and receptive to it. But then also, Justin, I'm with you. The thoughts, like I have a very active mind. And so I'll get a lot of like intuitive thoughts dropping in or insights. And same, like even during this conversation, that big chill, I've gotten that like 4 times. So I'm with you. And it's cool to be able to, that's why I call it learning to speak your body's own unique language of the senses. Cause it's popping off all day long. It's just a matter of kind of knowing what the hell it's saying to you.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think we've all learned to be like really up in our heads, but it's like, we're just leaving so much on the table. There's so much information coming through our bodies, and it's just like, can we just get there?
Yeah. But it's also when you have a lot of emotional trauma and things that you haven't worked through, and you're living in this state of adrenal fatigue and fight or flight, it's much harder to tap in and access that. And that's, again, why the inner work piece is so important.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you said that, because it's like, it's not just like, oh, whoops, we weren't thinking with our bodies. It's like, I'm afraid of my body, because I hate my body. I hate the way I look, or all these, or I had trauma, or sexual trauma, or whatever. We're so disconnected from our bodies in general that it's like scary to feel. Like we're never given tools to deal with emotions growing up. And so we have these emotions that are super in our face and powerful, and like, we don't know what to do. And so people do drugs, and they escape their bodies, and they do. And it's like, learning to intuition process of reconnecting with your body. And to do that, you definitely need to clear out the things that are blocking you from that. And then that opens up that whole new world for you.
We're also taught to think really logically and rationally. Yeah. So we're up in our heads all the time and trying to make sense of things, from that side of the brain. And, we're just completely cut off from using the body to make decisions, but it's so much more powerful.
Jackie, I'm going to have you back on. No offense to Justin by yourself. I would actually love, as you were saying that, I was thinking about how many conversations I've had with people I've met over the years who have children with autism and who were totally convinced that their kids are actually more tapped in than like anyone. And we have a couple minutes left, so I don't want to go on just like a total left-wing tangent and not be able to do the topic justice, but we can geek out about that offline and then have you back at another time if you feel like talking about it. But, so y'all, thank you so much. I love this conversation. It's super juicy. It's super fun. What is the website? Where do people go if they want to find out more about flow, the way you guys do it?
Yeah. Check us out at flow-mastery.com. You can just throw Flow Mastery into Google. If you're more interested in the science and want to see some of the research behind it, flowconsciousnessinstitute.com as well. You can also Google it. That's kind of the research body that we have. But if you want to just dive straight into flow and learn, the core essence of it, Flow Mastery is your spot.
I love that you have research to back it up too. And workshops and stuff, is that all on the Flow Mastery website? Like where you guys are going to be all over the world?
Yeah, Flow Consciousness Institute for that.
Okay, cool. So everyone listening, you want more of this? Check out both websites.
Yeah, we have to get better at actually listing out all the places that we're going to be. So we have a mailing list, and everything. All of our programs are on the Flow Consciousness Institute site. So we'll update it with all of our upcoming workshops. Sometimes, we just decided in New York to do a workshop, and 3 days later, one. So very in flow.
I love it. Well, everyone listening, catch them if you can. If it's in flow.
follow us on social media. That is a really good way as well.
Okay, cool. We'll put your links to all the things in the show notes. You guys are going to be episode number 178. So everyone listening, the show notes are at untameyourself.com/episode-178. You can find more Jackie, more Justin, more flow state. No, not flow state, flow consciousness, and flow mastery. I loved this. Thank you both so, so much.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Elizabeth. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You're a total powerhouse.
That's the most important thing, is like there is a lot of kind of structure around how to be a witch, and that for me defeats the whole object. It defeats the whole object of how it is for me and how it is for the work that I feel that I'm here to share, which is about women trusting themselves again. Like it's about us remembering the power that we've got inside ourselves. Like we are medicine women. Like if we trust ourselves, we know which herb to pick. Like we know which prayer to say. We know where the moon was. You know, when we're in sync with her, we understand that. It's like that's the magic. And then you can do whatever you want.